An aquatic element unexpectedly appeared here. In a fit of rage, Jin Shin didn't want to hear him talk. I want you dead. A spiritual hand descended from the sky in an instant. What? Your strength has increased. But in the next second, he sneered. How could it have only increased by a little compared to back then? A large hand covered in blue scales instantly blocked the attack. Ha ha, Jin Shin, you've been hiding here for too long. You can't keep up with the times. You owe so much blood debt from back then, and you still want to escape now? You'll just be a coward and keep running away. In an instant, countless blue giant claws rushed towards Jin Shin. Blood debt must be paid with blood, and it's a destiny that you can't escape. Just as he was panicking, a shout was heard. Patriarch? Patriarch, you're finally awake. The fried chicken you wanted is already done. It turns out that it was all just a dream, but the enemy in the dream felt so real, as if a strong opponent was waiting for him. Chen Daorang, little Luo, do you think nightmares can come true? Jin Shin asked. Upon hearing this, Luo Qingshan immediately raised his hand and said, Patriarch, I know nightmares. I often have hunger dreams at night because I don't eat to keep my figure, but the more I starve, the bigger they become. I even feel inferior because of it. This theory really stuns people. When the Chen family was down and out, I used to wake up scared by nightmares every day. It's well known that there are grievances in this world. If someone has too much grievance towards you, then you'll have nightmares. So, did you leave behind any enemies with deep grievances, Patriarch? Jin Shin carefully counted on his fingers and replied, I have enemies that I can count on both hands, but that's not a lot. However, the next second, he was so frightened that he foamed at the mouth. It turned out that Jin Shin was counting in tens of thousands. He had lived for 200,000 years and had caused a lot of trouble, accumulating a pile of enemies. At this point, Jin Shin just wanted to become stronger and immediately asked the system, where's my next successor? I want to start trial 3. Don't worry, host, you don't have to wait this time because of an unexpected event. The task started 10,000 years ago because the threat from the demon clan was not completely eradicated. The Merlin that was born from their dead body is now once again a threat to humanity. However, at this moment Zhu Wuyan was still thinking about how to escape the battle. Even the passing old lady couldn't bear to watch. Zhu Wuyan, who now poses a threat to the human race, was ashamed to escape when even dogs can cultivate, but he had a sad expression on his face. Do you really think I don't want to participate in the battle? It's military regulations that prohibit disabled people from participating in the war. Then he pulled out a disability certificate. So you're disabled, the old lady said. Did we blame you wrongly? But you have all your limbs intact. Where are you disabled? Faced with the old lady's questioning, he knew he couldn't hide it any longer. He had to show them his most vulnerable scar by opening his mouth wide. They looked at it for a long time but couldn't see any problem. Zhu Wuyan was now in tears. Can't you see it? He cried. I was born without tonsils. This is the most important organ for humans. Without tonsils, how can I fight? The old lady couldn't take it anymore. Fuck you, you're embarrassing. How can you apply for a disability certificate for such a trivial matter? I'll beat you up and make you disabled for real today. But a figure came and stopped them. Is Zhu Wuyan okay? Zhu Wuyan pretended not to know, but Malamo, who wanted to climb the ranks and become rich, did not intend to let him go. He wanted to kill Zhu Wuyan with one sword. At this critical moment, Zhu Wuyan's heart was pounding. The battle garb of the war god was guiding him to fight. However, he had been farming diligently for decades. How could he be a match for a Divine Realm powerhouse? Seeing the opponent's sword about to fall, he suddenly stood up. With one swing of his hoe, he unleashed an immense power and knocked down the opponent. It turned out that when he was sitting paralyzed on the ground, Zhu Wuyan saw that Malmo had actually stepped on the rice seedlings that he had worked so hard to plant. You can kill me, but dare to destroy my planted rice seedlings. Be careful, I'll kill you. This provoked an endless fighting spirit in Zhu Wuyan. You see, the only thing Zhu Wuyan cared about was his own land. Mao Men hurriedly stepped forward to stop him. Don't kill my brother. I will compensate you for the rice seedlings. Zhu Wuyan pointed at her nose and shouted sternly, but you have to compensate me with a whole penny. And if you dare to speak of my power, I'll kill him too. Mao Men repeatedly promised, but her mind was full of Zhu Wuyan's moves just now. If she guessed correctly, was that really the war god Rock? In other words, he had been the war god all along? The two of them had to rush back to the battlefield as soon as possible. When they arrived, they were stunned by the scene before them. The ground was littered with the corpses of the human race, and Merlin was in charge. The surviving fighting force had only one person left, General Wuho, and all the others were wounded. Moreover, there had been no news from the people sent out to find the war god. Now, he could only stand up again, forcibly overexerting his body. Ancestor war god, come down and help me. At this point, if the human race wanted to survive, they had to risk their lives. However, he was lower in rank than Merlin, and he was injured, so he was quickly defeated. Mao Men anxiously watched this scene. General Wu Ho. She couldn't care too much and wanted to tell the general about her discovery, but she was stopped by a figure in front of her. Stop. Are you trying to get Zhu Wuyan to kill me? Mao Men was completely enraged by her brother's selfishness at this critical juncture and slapped him. Get out of my way. Only cares about oneself, a coward who bullies the weak and fears the strong. Then he went straight to the marshal. Wu Ho, we found the war god, but I need time to invite him over. This news is like a shot of adrenaline, giving the desperate human army great hope. Then you go quickly. I will hold on until you come back. At this time, Zhu Wuyan was tying a rope on a tree because he was afraid of being sent to death on the battlefield if his strength was exposed. He was about to hang herself. Rather than being killed by Merlin, he would rather end her own life. Suddenly a voice came. Zhu Wuyan, what are you doing? He was already very nervous, but he was so scared that he kicked the stool away and swung on the tree. Mao Men thought he was swinging on a swing and wanted to explain, but he couldn't catch his breath and couldn't say anything. Mao Men said to him, you don't have to say anything. I have already told Wu Ho about your identity. Now the human race needs you. Please come and fight with me. Zhu Wuyan remained silent all the time. She thought that Zhu Wuyan was still angry about her brother's matter, so she had to say, as long as you are willing to help the human race, I am willing to die for my brother. But Zhu Wuyan still didn't say a word. She seemed to remember something at this moment. Then you said that as long as I married you, you would go to the battlefield. Okay, I will marry you. Suddenly, with a bang, Mao Men was attracted by this movement and saw Zhu Wuyan slowly rising and floating in the air. At the critical moment, he actually erupted with endless small universe. Is this for real? Because of love, this peasant suddenly learned to fly. On the battlefield, Wu Ho led the last remnants, resisting until the end, unaware that all of this was Merlin's trap, designed to lure out the war god. Despite this, the human race was on the verge of collapse. With a crack, Wu Ho's war spear broke in response to the last attack, and after countless battles, he ultimately died at the hands of Merlin. Countless cries echoed on the battlefield. Marshal. The final attack had already been launched towards him, but suddenly, a Ho appeared before his eyes and blocked the attack at the critical moment. Both sides were stunned at the scene. What? A human can block my attack? Zhu Wuyan had arrived just in time at the last moment. Is this the war god? Zhu Wuyan was internally flustered, having never seen a demon before, especially not one with such a ferocious appearance. Both sides stared at each other in disbelief. Is this the war god? And is he really at zero cultivation? It turns out this was a fake war god, delaying time. All demons listen up. Quickly kill the human army. The entire demon army rushed out with countless roars. The demon general directly attacked Zhu Wuyan, shouting, I'll eat you now. Zhu Wuyan tightly gripped the Ho in fear, closed his eyes, and swung forward with all his might. This attack unexpectedly directly annihilated Merlin's army. Wu Ho widened his eyes in disbelief. Those were all nourished spirit realm experts, second only to the commanders. Was that the intent of the war god's spear? Jin Shin of the 9 Deaths and One Life realm watched this scene with satisfaction. I knew that battle garb was perfect for this guy. You see, the strength of battle garb doesn't depend on one's cultivation, but rather on the intensity of the emotions of its owner. With victory in sight, the humans were cheering and jumping for joy. To show their sincerity, he shouted to Zhu Wuyan, Great one, if you can save the humans, we'll offer up 100,000 mu of fertile land. This statement struck right at Zhu Wuyan's heart. What farmer doesn't love land? He had to fight for that 100,000 mu of fertile land. He swung his hoe at the newly arrived demon, but the arrogant demon only raised his hand to block it and sneered. Besides being faster, do you really think a hoe can be used as a weapon? How ridiculous. But the next moment, he regretted his words. A tremendous force erupted, enveloping the entire battlefield. What incredible power! Battle Garb was definitely going to win. Zhu Wuyan helplessly looked ahead and asked, Did I solve it? Fighting was exhausting, but suddenly a burst of laughter rang out. A huge, grotesque hand slowly extended. Little ant, do you think I'm one of those foot soldiers? I have 100,000 demons living inside me. If you want to fight me, you have to kill me 100,000 times. This man, who was covered in heads and bodies, was a weapon specifically designed to kill humans. After surviving a devastating attack, not only did he not die, but he also unleashed an even greater force. Watching this horrifying scene before him, Zhu Wuyan was stunned on the spot. He was slapped into the ground with one hand and then bombarded with countless attacks. Each move was a deadly blow from the 100,000 demons who died at the hands of humans. Each strike was a fatal strike to the soul. Yes, he's right. I, Zhu Wuyan, can't do it alone. Looking at the god of war who was powerless to resist, the demon king suddenly felt bored. Chi, kill him. This monster's body suddenly showed a deep abyssal mouth, opening its mouth to swallow Zhu Wuyan. The human soldiers wept bitterly. "Lord God of War, Zhu Wuyan!" But suddenly, a loud shout rang out, and they were stunned. With a hoe, Zhu Wuyan struck down and killed 100,000 merlins in an instant. "So, I can't possibly cultivate these 100,000 acres alone." It turns out he was just thinking about how to cultivate these 100,000 acres earlier. He also wanted a cow. Huh, great God, is this it? With your status, you can ask for something higher. Isn't having a cow already high enough? I wouldn't dare dream of being so presumptuous. But even if I give you a cow, you still won't be able to till the land. I'll give you 1,000 cows. The Demon King was speechless but helpless. He could only take action himself. A lump of flesh bulged from his chest and turned into a ferocious eye. That was the demon eye that had unsealed the God of War's abyssal seal 1,000 years ago. Legend has it that the God of War had sealed the demon race within a barrier that even the peak of the King realm couldn't break. 1,000 years ago, Ling Tong broke the seal with a single blow from the demon eye, and the Merlin clan saw the light of day again. I didn't expect to see the demon eye again on this day. Countless energy gathered towards it, and it erupted with unparalleled power, directly piercing through Zhu Wuyan. Warning, host descendant dead. Mission failed. Trial 3 has ended. You can't proceed to the next continent. Black energy swirled around Jin Shin's body. "Don't be angry. I'll choose the second option for you." But Jin Shin remained calm. It turns out that the chicken wings were just burnt. "Don't worry, the emperor isn't in a hurry, so why should the eunuch be in a hurry? That's the battle garb of the war god. As long as the fighting spirit is not extinguished, the war god will not die." Zhu Wuyan resurrected at full health. Unexpectedly, with one hoe strike, a large hole was dug in his chest, causing the entire audience to gasp in shock. All of this was under the control of Jin Shin. Alas, after the fight, let's go home and farm. But suddenly, a pair of hands grabbed his neck, and when he turned his head, he saw that it was the Demon King. Why didn't he die? In the next second, Zhu Wuyan was stunned, as the battle garb of the war god also appeared on his body, and the Demon King even pulled out Zhu Wuyan's battle garb of the war god. It turns out that he had obtained a piece of the war god's remains 100,000 years ago, and he had survived for 100,000 years with it. The goal of this time was to find the remaining remains. Just now, he deliberately showed a flaw to lure out the battle garb of the war god. He quickly fused the remains into a new war god, breaking directly through to the Emperor realm, and even restoring his youth. "You human beings should all die." A demon eye the size of a meteor appeared in the sky, releasing a devastating attack that could destroy the world. People's hearts were filled with despair, but the attack suddenly bounced back, hitting the Ling Tong, and causing he to spit out a mouthful of blood. "Who is it? Who blocked my attack?" "He. I heard that you are also a person from 100,000 years ago, so you should remember my name. I am the Dark Emperor Jin Shin." He was once a human baby, but after 100,000 years, he became a generation of demon kings, leading the demons to ravage human beings, just because he was hunted by Merlin 100,000 years ago. But he was just a useless waste who couldn't cultivate, and was cruelly abandoned by the human race. Even his own mother had abandoned him. At the moment he thought he was going to die, the god of war killed the demons with his hands, but also abandoned him. At this moment, he had completely lost hope, but the god of war gave him hope again by telling him to fight or die. Under the guidance of the god of war, he unleashed an infinite cosmos, which is why he is who he is now. Jin Shin was slightly surprised and said that it wasn't what he heard. He was there at the time. It turns out that 100,000 years ago, he wanted to eat hot pot but had no base material, so he borrowed some spirit grass from the spirit tribe. However, the spirit tribe pursued him relentlessly and demanded that he return their tribe's treasure. After chasing them for 3 days and nights, he waved his hand and created a no-fly zone. But he made a big move, which caused part of the god of war's battle garb to fall off and was then picked up by Ling Tong. But who would believe this? Moreover, the god of war told him that he would die if he didn't fight. Jin Shin couldn't believe that the person who said such things was really the god of war. Jin Shin felt embarrassed upon hearing this. The truth was that after he opened the god of war abyss, he remembered that he had the base material, but he lacked dipping sauce for his hot pot. Suddenly, he went crazy and said that he had to dip it in bean paste. If he didn't, he would feel very unlucky. Therefore, there was no guidance from the god of war, and everything was his own doing. His faith of 100,000 years was destroyed by his own actions. And how could Ling Tong easily believe him? He summoned all his energy and transformed completely into the god of war battle garb, deciding to crush Jin Shin. People watched in horror as the true god of war raised his fist the size of a mountain. The invincible power split the ground open. "Die!" he shouted. But Jin Shin looked unhappy. "Why does no one believe me when I speak recently?" he wondered. In the next moment, he disappeared and appeared in front of Ling Tong. He slapped him hard, and at the same time, a giant spirit hand struck Ling Tong, scattering his body. This slap stunned Ling Tong. Are you the Shintian Emperor? Even the immortal war god was easily defeated by him. Who else could it be but the Shintian Emperor from years ago? If I don't run now, I'll die for sure. With a swish, he shot towards the war god abyss. The Shintian Emperor's power was too terrifying. Not running would mean certain death. Zhu Wuyan was astonished by the scene. Even the Demon King is running away. Could that person really be the Patriarch? Realizing this, he immediately kneeled down. Patriarch, please destroy Ling Tong, or he'll surely come back to get revenge on the human race. Ah, you finally believe me now? But he had no intention of saving him. I'm just here to see the ditch I dug. Zhu Wuyan was getting anxious. Patriarch, stop talking nonsense. The war god abyss has great significance to our human race. Please go deal with Ling Tong. So far, this person still thinks that Jin Shin is deceiving him and keeps muttering, Patriarch, I believe in you, but please don't pretend to be a war god. Jin Shin was speechless. Even after living in seclusion for 100,000 years, no one believed him. He decided not to say anything and show them who the true ruler of this continent was. Suddenly, two giant hands descended from the sky, connecting heaven and earth, and slammed down on both sides of the war god abyss. With a single thought, they forcibly closed the war god abyss, and at that moment, the world fell silent. Zhu Wuyan stopped complaining, but the Ling Tong inside the war god abyss suffered a great loss. At that moment, he finally realized his mistake. The prophecy about the war god's return to the mortal world did not refer to him or Zhu Wuyan, but rather to the Shintian Emperor, Jin Shin. It took Einstein 100 years to discover the laws of crustal movement, but the mountain in front of them suddenly teleported 100 feet, directly breaking his theory. It turned out that Jin Shin was responsible for all of this. He merged the war god abyss into the war god peak, and the Ling Tong was also shaken to death inside. However, his hatred did not dissipate, and with the battle garb of the war god, he was immortal and would eventually come back to seek revenge. The Mighty One, when Ling Tong returns in the future, will you still help us? Jin Shin's answer instantly shocked them. Why should I save you? What does your death have to do with me? However, to completely solve Ling Tong, they still needed Zhu Wuyan because to solve Ling Tong, someone had to take on his battle body and soul, and Zhu Wuyan was undoubtedly the best candidate. However, with the battle garb of the war god, Zhu Wuyan would always be drawn into battles, and the Ling Tong's resentful soul would always affect him, causing him to bear double the pain and could die at any moment. Would Zhu Wuyan still be willing to accept? After all, he was afraid to even step onto the battlefield before. Therefore, Jin Shin did not force him, and if he refused, he could live peacefully as a farmer. Upon hearing this, Zhu Wuyan's face lit up with joy, and he ran directly to Mao Men. Wife, regarding this decision, I first have to apologize to you. After experiencing what just happened, she didn't want Zhu Wuyan to suffer anymore. Then she heard a sound of apology, and Zhu Wuyan hugged her tightly. I've decided to take on the battle garb of the war god. Let's put our marriage on hold for now, or else you'll be a widow. This sudden turn of events stunned everyone, and the Mao men couldn't come to their senses for a long time. In fact, after experiencing war, Zhu Wuyan also understood why people knowingly risked their lives without hesitation. It was because everyone had something they wanted to protect with their lives. Now he also has an important person, so he can't continue to be worthless. Before, everyone said that the invincible warrior was the war god, but now Zhu Wuyan believes that those who bravely face death are the true war gods. Patriarch, I, the junior Zhu Wuyan, am willing to take on the battle garb of the war god. I have no regrets in this life. His passionate speech made everyone see Zhu Wuyan in a new light. Not bad, kid. You've finally earned the Patriarch's approval. The Patriarch then passed the soul of the Ling Tong and the battle garb of the war god to him. He casually extracted the soul of Ling Tong and said, Ling Tong, behave yourself inside the body of my junior. At this point, Ling Tong didn't dare to act up anymore and was immediately integrated into Zhu Wuyan's body by Jin Shin. At this moment, the system's voice rang out, announcing that the junior Zhu Wuyan had completely resolved the Merlin crisis and had reached the 7th level of the Emperor realm, and so the war finally came to an end. But suddenly a green light shot straight up into the sky, and because the power of the host had affected the earth, the burial ground of the spirit race had emerged prematurely. As a result, the 4th trial was opened ahead of schedule. The goal, for any junior to take the inheritance of the spirit race. Unexpectedly, after robbing the spirit tribe back then, now they have to go and dig up their ancestral grave. This is really unfortunate for them. Zhu Wuyan, the Patriarch, wants you to take down the inheritance in that tomb. Only success is allowed, not failure.